The aliens expected Earth to beg when they showed the captured human on every screen in the galaxy. Instead, Earth went silent. And Captain Darius Vale smiled before anyone had told him the broadcast was live. The smile was small enough that most worlds missed it. A corner of his mouth shifted under the blood, under the split lip, under the black restraint collar locked around his throat. But Varath Kor saw it from the interrogation gallery above the chamber, and for the first time in 300 public executions, he did not speak immediately. The chamber had been built to make prisoners look smaller than they were. Its walls rose in smooth obsidian curves, polished until every light became a blade. The floor was a white circle beneath the prisoner's chair, bright enough to erase shadows, clean enough to make blood look deliberate. Around that circle stood 12 imperial recorders, each feeding the same image to conquered moons, trade stations, military courts, refugee shelters, and every human channel the Dominion of Malachar had managed to breach. One human. One chair. One empire leaning close to watch him break. Darius sat with his hands fixed behind him and his boots bolted to the floor. His dark uniform had been stripped of rank, flag, and unit patch, but the aliens had failed to understand that removing symbols did not remove posture. He sat straight even when the chair tried to bend him forward. He breathed slowly even when the collar tightened at random intervals to test panic response. His left eye was swollen nearly shut, but the right one stayed open, clear, and fixed on the main lens. Not on his captors. Not on the wounds. The lens. Varath Kor descended the gallery steps with the careful patience of a creature who had never needed to hurry. His body was tall and jointed, armored in natural plates the color of old iron. Thin silver tendrils moved along his jaw when he tasted fear in the air, searching for the chemical sharpness that had preceded every surrender he had ever won. Most prisoners gave it to him before the first question. Some hid it behind rage. Others prayed. A few sang until the instruments corrected their lungs. The human gave him nothing useful. That irritated him more than resistance. Above the interrogation floor, the projection screens showed Earth from orbit. Blue oceans. White clouds. Nightside cities burning with ordinary light, not warfire. The image had been intercepted 12 minutes earlier from human civilian networks, and Varath had ordered it displayed behind the prisoner for psychological contrast. Let the galaxy see what waited to be punished. Let Earth watch one of its own reduced to an object. Let the silence grow until it became shame. But Earth did not transmit surrender codes. Earth did not scramble rescue fleets. Earth did not flood the network with grief. It simply watched. Varath stopped 2 steps from the white circle. Captain Darius Vale, he said, and the translation grid turned his voice into polished English. Officer of the Terran Strategic Reconnaissance Division. Decorated at Rhea Gate. Survived the Glass Trench campaign. You understand why you are here. Darius blinked once. The silence after it felt intentional. You were taken beyond the Helix Verge, Varath continued. Alone. Unescorted. Carrying no active distress beacon. No fleet followed. No extraction attempt occurred. Your command has abandoned you. Darius looked past him, toward the screen where Earth turned slowly in the dark. Then he said, That what they told you? The translators caught the words perfectly, but not the temperature inside them. Not defiance. Not fear. Something quieter. Almost bored. In the command balcony above, Overlord Threx Malachar shifted forward on his throne platform. The movement was slight, but every officer around him stiffened. Malachar did not waste attention. If he leaned forward, something had failed to behave as predicted. Varath felt the shift without looking up. Good, he thought. Let the Overlord see patience before precision. He lifted one hand, and the recorders tightened their focus until the human's face filled billions of screens. We have opened this broadcast to your homeworld, Varath said. Every defense council. Every civilian band. Every military relay still capable of receiving our signal. They will hear you confess the coordinates of Earth's forward bases. They will hear you ask them to comply. Then they will watch you live if they obey, or watch you die if they do not. Darius adjusted his jaw against the collar. A bead of blood ran down his chin and disappeared into the torn fabric at his neck. Bad offer, he said. Varath's tendrils stopped moving. Across the chamber, one of the junior recorders clicked out of sync. It was a tiny mechanical error, quickly corrected, but Darius heard it. His good eye moved toward the sound for less than a second, then returned to the lens. Varath noticed that too. This one counted things. Not hope. Not rescue. Things. Pain is not the center of this procedure, Varath said. Pain is merely the language primitive nervous systems understand first. I prefer truth. Darius nodded faintly as if granting a point in a dull briefing. Then ask better questions. The first murmur ran through the Imperial officers behind the glass. Veyrath did not turn. Interrogation when done properly was architecture. Each question removed a wall. Each silence lowered a ceiling. Each measured injury narrowed the prisoner's world until the only open door was obedience. But Darius Vale's world did not seem to be narrowing. It seemed to be waiting. On the largest projection, Earth remained silent. Veyrath raised his hand again. The collar around Darius's throat came alive with a low blue pulse. Muscles locked across the human's shoulders. His teeth pressed together. The chair sensors registered elevated pulse, nerve strain, oxygen disruption, involuntary tremor. His eyes stayed on the lens. The pulse ended. Darius exhaled once through his nose. Veyrath stepped closer. There is no honor in being forgotten by your species. For the first time, something changed in Darius's face. Not fear. Not grief. A memory crossed him so fast it almost vanished. Gray rain on a launch deck, Admiral Lyra Voss standing beneath the floodlights, her hand on his shoulder before the mission began. No cameras then. No speeches. Just her saying one sentence low enough that only he could hear it. Hold until they stop looking at you like a prisoner. Darius swallowed blood. Veyrath saw the movement and mistook it for weakness. There, he whispered. That is the door. He turned toward the recorders and opened his arms to the galaxy. Witnessed the first fracture. Darius looked directly into the center lens. And smiled again, wider this time, as if someone very far away had just confirmed they were listening. For 19 seconds after Darius smiled, no one in the chamber moved. That was the first error. Veyrath Kor had built his reputation on momentum. A prisoner was shown. A demand was made. Pain arrived before thought could organize itself. Then fear spread outward, not from the captive, but from everyone watching who imagined themselves in the chair next. 19 seconds gave people time to notice the wrong things. They noticed that the human was breathing in a pattern. 4 seconds in. 4 seconds held. 4 seconds out. They noticed that his fingers, locked behind the chair, were not clenched. One thumb brushed the inside of his wrist at slow intervals, as if counting a rhythm only he could hear. They noticed that Earth still had not answered. On the prisoner platform, the collar's blue glow faded back into the metal. Darius lowered his chin slightly, not enough to look submissive, just enough to hide the fresh blood gathering at his lip. The motion made Veyrath step closer. A weak animal hid wounds. A trained one hid signals. He dismissed the thought before it could become shape. Your species is listening, Veyrath said. You know this. Every delay increases civilian consequence. One of the side screens changed. A Terran relay map appeared, stolen from intercepted navigation buoys, lunar habitats, Martian defense nodes, Jovian fuel stations, the outer shipyards around Neptune. Red Imperial marks hovered over each target like waiting teeth. Veyrath pointed to Earth. One command from me, and your silence becomes expensive. Darius studied the map. Not quickly. Not desperately. He looked at it the way a mechanic looked at a tool left on the wrong bench. That map is old, he said. The officers behind the glass went still again. Veyrath's jaw tendrils tightened. Old enough to kill your civilians. Old enough to make you feel informed. The words moved through the translation grid and came out clean, almost polite. Somewhere above the chamber, a technician made the mistake of checking the relay age. His hands paused over the console. Veyrath heard the pause without hearing the breath behind it. Darius heard both. His thumb brushed his wrist again. What? Twice? Veyrath turned his head a fraction. You are observant for a man with no options. Darius looked at him. Options are loud. I prefer quiet ones. The chamber temperature dropped 1 degree as the floor conduits activated. A psychological setting. Most species felt cold as abandonment. Humans reacted inconsistently, which was one reason Veyrath disliked them. Their histories had filled the same sensations with too many meanings. Cold could be fear. Cold could be focus. Cold could be home. On the broadcast, civilian worlds watched the white floor frost around the humans' boots. Darius did not look down. Veyrath walked in a slow circle around the chair. You were taken in a dead zone. No allies. No weapons. No pursuit signature. We recovered your shuttle in pieces. Did you? We recovered enough. That usually means no. The answer landed softly, but it changed the room again. A few Imperial officers glanced toward the evidence wall, where fragments of Darius's shuttle had been arranged in a neat arc for the broadcast. Blackened hull. Cracked flight glass. a torn seat frame, a melted human insignia. The display was meant to say, "We caught him." Darius looked at it and seemed to see something else. A launch bay under gray rain. Admiral Lyra Voss standing with both hands behind her back, not because she was formal, but because one hand had shaken before she hit it. Darius had noticed then. He noticed everything when people tried not to be seen. "You can refuse," she had told him. "This mission will not have witnesses. If it works, no one will know why. If it fails, no one will admit it was ours." Darius had looked past her at the small shuttle waiting in the rain. No escort. No markings beyond a false civilian registry. No rescue window in the official file. "What happens if they take me too soon?" Lyra had answered after a pause. "Then you hold longer." Now, in the white circle, Veyrath mistook that memory for grief and leaned into it. "You remember command?" he said. "Good. Then remember what command does when assets lose value." Darius returned from the rain slowly. The right eye sharpened. "Careful," he said. The single word made Veyrath stop behind him. Not because it was a threat. Threats were common. Threats were reflex. This sounded like a correction. As if Darius had seen the interrogator step near a cliff and felt professional obligation to warn him. Overlord Threx Malakar's voice entered the chamber from above, deep enough to make the glass vibrate. "Proceed to neural extraction." The order ended the performance. Veyrath looked up once. "The broadcast value declines if the subject becomes incoherent." "Then keep him coherent," Malakar said. No anger. No impatience. That made it worse. The Overlord did not care whether Darius broke beautifully now. He cared whether Earth's silence meant ignorance or design. Veyrath understood the difference and hated that he understood it in front of everyone. He signaled the technicians. The back wall opened without sound. 3 neural lances extended from the dark, each thin as a needle and long enough to reach the base of the human skull. They unfolded with surgical grace, silver tips humming against the air. On most worlds that sound had become legend. Children stopped crying when elders whispered it. Captains surrendered ships when they heard it through a prisoner's open channel. Darius looked at the tips. For the first time his smile disappeared. The chamber relaxed around that small loss. Then he closed his good eye. Veyrath stepped into the white circle. At last. Darius whispered something too low for the room microphones to catch. Veyrath bent closer. "What was that?" Darius opened his eye again. "I said," he murmured, "you're finally looking in the right place." The first lance touched the skin behind his ear. Far away on a silent human channel, a dormant signal heard the contact and woke. It did not broadcast yet. It listened first, measuring the enemy through the instrument they had chosen to open alive. The neural lance entered Darius Vale's skull without tearing flesh. That was the elegance of Dominion technology. It did not need blood to make a body feel invaded. It slid between nerve impulses, unfolded inside the signal, and turned memory into architecture. Veyrath Kor watched the human's pupils widen on the chamber feed. Good. The first layer was always sensory. Pain, light, names, faces. The mind tried to throw simple things at the intruder first, like furniture shoved against a door. Most species broke there. They gave up passwords wrapped in childhood voices, fleet routes hidden behind dead parents, surrender protocols buried under the smell of rain. Darius gave him a corridor. Not a metaphor. Not chaos. A corridor. Veyrath stood inside it. For a moment the interrogation chamber vanished, replaced by a narrow passage of matte gray walls, lit by emergency strips along the floor. No doors. No windows. No scent. No warmth. At the far end, a single red light pulsed once every 4 seconds. For in. For held. For out. Veyrath's tendrils stiffened in the real chamber. A trained mind could construct barriers. Intelligence officers did it poorly. Priests did it beautifully. Assassins did it with traps that screamed their location. But this was not a barrier. It had no threat in it. It was a waiting room. He moved forward. The corridor stretched with him. On the external monitors, the technicians exchanged glances as the extraction flow flattened. Instead of fragments rising from the human brain in broken sequence, the neural feed showed a smooth line of silence. One technician whispered, "No scatter." Veyrath heard him through the chamber link. Continue depth. The second lance activated. Darius's body arched against the restraints. His right hand tightened for the first time behind the chair, fingers digging into his own palm hard enough to whiten the knuckles. The pain registered. The human felt it. The human was not immune. But the corridor remained. Veyrath reached the red light. It opened into rain. Gray water fell across a launch deck under a sky with no stars. A small shuttle waited under flood lamps, its hull painted in civilian colors so dull they looked ashamed of themselves. Two mechanics moved without speaking. A woman in a dark admiral's coat stood before Darius Vale, her silver hair tied back, her face calm in the way only exhausted people could make calm look sharp. Admiral Lyra Voss. Veyrath marked the name and reached for surrounding data. Command authority. Mission file. Target route. Extraction codes. The memory blurred around his hand. Lyra's voice remained. You can refuse. Darius stood younger in the rain, unwounded, unchained, wearing the same stillness he wore now in the chair. If I refuse, someone else goes. Yes. Are they better? The Admiral did not answer fast enough. Darius gave a small nod, as if that settled the matter more completely than courage could have. Veyrath pushed deeper. The rain slowed. Lyra stepped closer, and for 1 second her hand rose to his shoulder. The gesture was almost nothing. Not a salute. Not affection displayed for observers. A pressure point. A human transfer of weight from one body to another. This mission will not have witnesses, she said. If it works, no one will know why. If it fails, no one will admit it was ours. Darius looked at the shuttle. What happens if they take me too soon? Then you hold longer. Veyrath froze the memory. There. A deliberate capture scenario. He pulled at it and the memory resisted like wet rope. Open the mission parameters, he ordered from inside the feed. In the real chamber, Darius's lips moved. No. The word was not for the room. The third lance came alive. This time the pain broke sound out of him. It was short. Ugly. Human. A breath forced through locked teeth before pride could kill it. The chamber recorders drank it greedily, magnifying the sound across the network. Officers behind the glass relaxed. Overlord Threx Malachar leaned back half an inch. Then the sound ended. Inside the neural field, the launch deck shattered. Veyrath fell through pieces of memory. Darius alone in the shuttle. Darius cutting the military transponder out with a blade. Darius burning a photograph until the faces vanished. Darius placing his own hand into a scanning cradle while a machine wrote something beneath the skin of his wrist. Not a beacon. Too small. Too quiet. Veyrath reached for the machine. The image folded away. Another memory replaced it. Darius floating in darkness after the ambush, helmet cracked, breath freezing against the glass, watching Dominion retrieval claws close around his shuttle debris. His emergency beacon blinked dead beside him because he had killed it himself. He had not been found. He had waited in their path. Veyrath tore himself out of the feed. The interrogation chamber came back in a violent white flash. Darius slumped forward against the collar, sweat running down his temple, breath ragged now. His smile was gone. That should have comforted the room. It did not comfort Veyrath. He looked at the technicians. Isolate all implanted systems. The senior technician hesitated. We scanned him twice. Scan him again. Blue grids crossed Darius's body from skull to boot. Metal fragments were tagged. Bone repairs. Old battlefield ceramic. Subdermal clot mesh. Nerve scar tissue. Nothing that qualified as active hardware. The technician looked relieved. No transmitter. No beacon. No encoded emission. Darius raised his head slowly. His good eye found Veyrath with painful precision. You keep looking for a thing, he said. Veyrath stepped back into the white circle. What are you? Darius swallowed and the collar clicked against his throat. For the first time he did not answer immediately. He looked past Veyrath, past the recorders, past the broadcast lens, toward Earth turning blue and silent on the screen behind them. Then he said very softly, a route. Deep inside the neural lance, something that had been listening since first contact marked its third confirmed pathway through Dominion encryption. It still did not speak. Not yet. It only followed the signal home. Veyrath Core ordered the broadcast delay killed. For the first time since the chamber lights had come on, the galaxy did not see what happened next in perfect real time. A 3-second Imperial buffer slid between the white circle and every watching world. It was small enough for propaganda. Large enough for concealment. Darius noticed the lag. His eye moved to the corner recorder, where a tiny amber light had replaced the clean blue pulse of live transmission. Veyrath saw him see it. That was the second error. The human did not need to know what the light meant. He only needed to know that something had changed after he said the word route. Overlord Threx Malachar descended from the balcony without ceremony. His guards followed in 2 silent lines, their armor sealed, their weapons angled low. He was broader than Veyrath, older, built like a siege engine taught to stand upright. The officers lowered their eyes as he crossed the obsidian floor, but Darius kept looking at the amber light. Malachar stopped outside the white circle. What has he carried into my chamber? Veyrath did not answer quickly enough. The Overlord looked at him then. Not with rage. Rage left space for survival. This was assessment. Veyrath turned to the technicians. Run invasive system mapping. Biological carriers. Chemical locks. Memory-coded triggers. Anything that responds to Dominion signal contact. The senior technician's hands moved too fast across the console. Thin bands of light passed through Darius's body again, deeper this time, reading muscle memory, nerve conductivity, cellular irregularity, old scar lattices. The scan returned no device. Then it returned a pattern. Not metal. Not software. A rhythm. A chain of microscopic nerve responses firing in precise intervals along damaged tissue near the base of Darius's spine, then disappearing before the scan could tag them. It looked like pain residue. It looked like trauma. It looked, to every ordinary medical system, like an old wound misbehaving under stress. Veyrath stared at the readout. Darius breathed in for 4 seconds. Held for 4. Out for 4. The pattern answered. The technician whispered, "It is using his autonomic response." Malachar's lower hands closed slowly. Veyrath stepped toward the screen. Translate. It is not transmitting outward, the technician said. It is recording what touches it. Every extraction command. Every encryption handshake. Every relay the lances request permission from. It is following our authorization chain backward. The chamber lost its sound. Even the machinery seemed to lower itself. Malachar looked down at Darius. Earth placed a map inside a man. Darius's lips cracked when he smiled this time. No, he said. You placed the map around him. Veyrath moved before anger could become visible. He seized the technician by the shoulder plate. Sever the neural lances. The technician cut the connection. Nothing happened. Darius's body relaxed by a fraction, but the pattern continued moving on the monitor in smaller pulses, like embers under ash. The technician cut power to the lances. The pattern continued. He isolated the interrogation chamber from the ship network. For one beautiful second the line went flat. Then the chamber lights flickered. Every Imperial console rebooted under emergency authority, not from the interrogation wing, but from the capital defense grid above them. The system had mistaken the isolation for sabotage and reached inward to verify command integrity. It opened a higher door. Veyrath stared at the screens as new pathways unfolded across them. Defense relays, orbital customs locks, royal encryption corridors, shield authentication knots, buried administrative channels that no prisoner, spy, or captured device should have ever seen. Echo 7 moved through them without speaking. Not fast. Not loud. Patiently. Like a hand sliding under a locked door while everyone in the room argued about the key. Malachar turned his head toward the main window above the chamber. Beyond it, the hidden capital world of the Dominion hung under a violet sky, covered in shield rings and black towers, its location erased from every public map. A planet that conquered systems had whispered about but never found. A planet whose name was removed from the mouths of slaves before they were sold. Darius had been inside its orbit for less than an hour. Earth had not fired a shot. Malachar stepped into the white circle. The recorders adjusted automatically, catching him beside the prisoner. To the delayed broadcast it looked like dominance. To everyone in the chamber, it looked like the Overlord had forgotten where the camera was. He bent close enough that his shadow covered Darius's face. How much have you sent? Darius swallowed once. His throat moved against the collar. Enough to make you ask that. Malachar struck him. The blow snapped Darius's head sideways and sent blood across the white floor. The chair alarm screamed. 2 restraints strained against fractured bone stress. Somewhere in the delayed broadcast, billions would see the hit 3 seconds late and think it was punishment. In the chamber it felt like confirmation. Veyrath watched the blood spread. Not random. The drops trembled in small circles as the capital shield generators shifted above them, cycling into emergency lock. Every system Malachar activated to protect his world became one more authenticated pulse. One more bright thread for Echo 7 to follow. Veyrath understood then with a coldness that began behind his ribs. They had not extracted the human. They had plugged him in. He moved to the command console himself. Stop all defensive escalation. Manual silence. No more network actions. No more scans. No more locks. Malachar turned on him. If Earth is receiving coordinates, we seal the planet. If you seal it through the grid, you feed him. The Overlord's guards lifted their weapons toward Veyrath before anyone remembered he had not attacked. Darius laughed once. It was not loud. It had no strength behind it. It came out broken, wet, and brief. But every weapon in the chamber shifted toward him anyway. He raised his head slowly from the blood. "You're learning," he said. Veyrath's tendrils flattened against his jaw. On the monitor, Echo 7 reached the first royal relay. The amber broadcast light went blue again by itself. The delay vanished. Across the galaxy, the audience returned just in time to see the Overlord of the Dominion standing too close to a bleeding human who had begun to look less like a prisoner with every passing second. The blue light returned, and with it the galaxy saw the room breathe wrong. Veyrath Core did not look at the recorders anymore. That was how Darius knew the performance had ended. The interrogator who had entered the chamber like a surgeon now moved like a man hearing footsteps behind a locked door. Overlord Threx Malachar still stood in the white circle, blood on one knuckle, shadow over the prisoner, trying to make the image mean what it had meant a minute earlier. Empire over captive. Power over flesh. Silence over resistance. But the room was no longer obeying the image. Behind the glass, officers were speaking too quickly. Console lights changed faster than hands could cover them. Red maps bloomed and vanished across the walls, each one showing a different layer of the hidden capital's defenses waking up, then being forced back down, then waking again because some buried protocol believed stillness meant treason. Every correction became a confession. Every confession became a path. Darius tasted blood and copper and old rain. His left arm had gone numb below the elbow. Something in his ribs had shifted where Malachar struck him, and each breath carried a small white spark of pain across his chest. He focused on the rhythm because the rhythm was all he had been allowed to keep. For in. For held. For out. Not prayer. Not courage. A key turned by lungs. Veyrath stepped between Malachar and the consoles. All personnel disconnect from central authority. Physical separation only. Cut optical relays. Remove power cells. No command verification. An officer stared at him. Without command verification, the shield lattice will classify this chamber as compromised. Then let it classify. Malachar's voice flattened. You are ordering my capital to blind itself. Veyrath turned slowly. I am ordering it to stop bleeding its veins into his mouth. The chamber heard that. So did the broadcast. On occupied moons and mining stations and refugee decks, beings who had watched Dominion interrogations for years leaned closer to their screens, not because the human had stood, not because an army had arrived, but because the Dominion had begun arguing with itself in front of a chair. Darius lifted his head by inches. The motion cost him enough that his vision pinched at the edges, black crawling inward. He held until the black retreated. Veyrath saw the effort and stepped close. How much longer does it need? Darius smiled without opening his mouth. That hurt less. You're still asking like I'm the machine. Veyrath looked at the wrist, the spine, the skull, the ruined skin behind the ear where the lances had entered. His training tried to reduce the problem to anatomy. Device. Signal. Carrier. Trigger. Then his gaze moved to the breathing. The pattern. The pauses. The body that had been turned into a metronome because no transmitter could be trusted. No metal could pass a Dominion scan. No code could survive a neural extraction unless it was written into suffering itself. Veyrath's tendrils went still. They built it out of pain response, he whispered. Darius blinked once. Not confirmation. Not denial. Enough. Malachar heard it and made the decision a conqueror makes when he has forgotten that force is also a language machines understand. Seal the palace grid, he ordered. Full royal lockdown. Planetary silence. Burn every external relay. Veyrath's head snapped toward him. Do not. Malachar raised one blood-marked hand. The capital obeyed. Above the chamber, beyond stone and shield and violet sky, 1,000 relay towers folded their transmissions inward. Orbital rings rotated into closed formation. Royal defense nodes demanded identity from every system beneath them, from every gate, every weapon platform, every buried bunker, every ancestral vault of authority hidden under the oldest towers of Malachar's world. They did exactly what Echo 7 had been waiting for. The monitor behind the technicians went white. Not with failure. With arrival. A single line of human text appeared inside the Imperial diagnostic field, not transmitted in words, but translated by the system because the system believed it had been asked to authenticate a command. Route confirmed. For half a second nobody breathed. Then the capital's outer sky changed. At first it looked like a defect in the window glass. Small black cuts opened above the violet clouds, thin and silent, as if someone had taken a blade to the atmosphere. 1 became 5. 5 became 30. 30 became too many to count before the first shadow passed across the sun. Human ships did not emerge in formation. They emerged in silence. Long dark hulls slipped through the cuts with their running lights dead, armor scarred matte gray, engines cold until the last possible second. They did not announce themselves. They did not broadcast demands. They did not play victory music for the watching galaxy. They simply arrived exactly where no one was supposed to arrive. The first Dominion orbital platform turned toward them. It died before its warning light completed one pulse. Not in an explosion. Not in fire. A neat circular hole appeared through its central spine. The station's lights went out from the middle, ring by ring like an eye closing. Only then did the human fleet ignite. Blue-white engine flares burned across the capital sky. Veyrath looked through the window and forgot the prisoner for 1 second. Darius did not. He watched Veyrath watching the sky, and in that small transfer of attention he understood that Echo 7 had done its work. The route was open. The door had held. Admiral Lyra Voss had received what no map had ever given her. A way home to the monster. The chamber speakers crackled. No Imperial officer touched them. A human voice entered the room, low, steady, female, threaded through the same royal relay Malachar had used to seal his world. Captain Vale, Admiral Lyra Voss said. Status. The sound did more damage than the ships. Darius closed his eye. For one breath the chair disappeared. The white circle disappeared. The blood, the collar, the lances, the cameras, the Empire, all of it moved far enough away that there was only rain on a launch deck and a hand on his shoulder that had pretended not to shake. He opened his eye again. Late, he said. Lyra's answer came after the smallest pause. Noted. Then the sky began to fall in measured pieces. The first pieces of the sky fell without flame. They came down as dark shapes against the violet clouds, fragments of orbital guns cut loose with such precision that they did not explode until they struck the empty kill zones outside the capital towers. Human ships moved above them in patient arcs, not wasting fire, not chasing panic, removing one defense at a time while the palace grid screamed for permissions it no longer trusted. Inside the chamber nobody shouted anymore. That was what unsettled Veyrath core most. He had heard empires die loudly. He had heard cities beg through burning relays. He had heard commanders curse gods they had never believed in. But this room had gone quiet except for the machines, and the machines were beginning to sound small. Overlord Threx Malachar stood beneath the main window with his head tilted back. His guards waited for an order that would still make sense after it was spoken. None came. A second human voice entered the chamber speakers. Mal. Tactical. Calm enough to be cruel without intending to be. Royal Shield Ring 1 disabled. Ring 2 accepting surrender pings from internal stations. Ring 3 is attempting self-isolation. Admiral Lyra Voss answered from somewhere above the world. Do not let Ring 3 close. Already inside it. Darius Vale let his head rest back against the chair. The collar remained locked. The restraints remained sealed. The pain remained where it had been placed. But the room around him had changed shape. It no longer pointed inward at him. It pointed outward. Malachar turned from the window. His eyes found Darius, and for the first time they did not look like weapons. They looked like doors opened onto weather. You brought them to my home, he said. Darius breathed in. 4 seconds. Held. No, he said. You did. Veyrath looked down at the blood on the white floor. A few drops had dried at the edge of the circle. They were small, nearly black now, caught inside the polished surface like coordinates no one had bothered to erase. He saw the procedure again in pieces. The public broadcast. The old relay map. The neural lances. The royal lockdown. Every clever measure had been a hand reaching deeper into a trap because the trap had worn the shape of helplessness. He had spent his life opening minds. The human had let him open a door. Outside, a Dominion cruiser tried to rise from the lower atmosphere. A human vessel drifted above it, silent and close, and the cruiser stopped climbing before a shot was fired. Its running lights shut down one row at a time. Surrender signal. Internal mutiny. Command severance. Veyrath could not tell which. That ignorance hurt worse than certainty. Malachar raised his hand toward Darius again. Not to strike. The motion died halfway. His fingers hung in the air, curled and useless, as if his body remembered conquest but could no longer locate the meaning of it. The chamber recorders turned by themselves to capture the gesture. Varath saw the Overlord notice them. Saw his mouth open. Saw no command come out. That was the break. Not the fleet in the sky. Not the falling stations. Not the stolen route. It was the exact moment when Threx Malachar, who had ordered worlds erased from maps, understood that the galaxy was watching him search for a sentence and find nothing. Darius saw it too. He did not smile. That would have been too small. The chamber speakers crackled again. Captain Vale, Admiral Voss said. Her voice was controlled, but something under it had come loose. Medical teams are inbound. Hold position. A breath of ruined laughter moved through Darius's chest. Was planning on it. Varath stepped toward him. The guards lifted their rifles, uncertain now whether the interrogator was protecting the prisoner, attacking him, or simply moving because standing still had become unbearable. Varath stopped at the edge of the white circle. What was the true weapon? He asked. Darius looked at him through swelling, blood, and exhaustion. You still want it to be a weapon. Varath's tendrils tightened once, then loosened. Above them another shield ring failed. Blue-white light washed across the window and turned every face in the chamber pale. Darius spoke carefully, each word costing breath. You built an empire that needed everyone afraid of the chair. He looked at the broken lances hanging behind him. We built people who could sit in it. No one answered. The line did not sound like victory. It sounded like an autopsy. Varath lowered his eyes. For the first time in his career, he did not look into the prisoner's mind for the secret behind the words. There was no hidden chamber left. No code. No technique. No final extraction. Only the unbearable simplicity of a species that had taken suffering, measured it, trained inside it, and then sent one of its own into the enemy's most sacred room with nothing but breath and time. A siren began far below the palace. Not the sharp imperial alarm that demanded obedience. A low civilian tone. Evacuation. Malachar heard it and flinched. That was worse than fear. Fear could be turned into anger. A flinch belonged to the body before pride arrived to edit it. The Overlord looked at the window again. Human ships filled the sky in layers now, not crowding, not rushing, simply occupying the impossible place above his capital as if it had been marked for them long before he knew it existed. Admiral Voss spoke one final time through the royal relay. Dominion Command, this is Earth Fleet. Your palace remains standing because Captain Darius Vale is inside it. Lower your weapons. No threat followed. The absence of one did the work. One by one rifles dipped. Not all at once. Not proudly. Not with ceremony. A guard near the rear lowered his first. Then another. Then an officer behind the glass removed his hands from the console and placed them where the cameras could see. Malachar did not move. Varath did. He reached to the control panel beside the chair and released the throat collar. It opened with a soft click. Darius sucked in one clean breath and nearly passed out from the luxury of it. Varath released the wrist restraints next. His hands were steady until the final lock. Then they shook. Darius noticed. Varath knew he noticed. Neither of them spoke. When the last restraint fell away, Darius did not stand. He could not. Two human medics entered through a breach cut into the far wall, their armor wet with violet rain, their rifles lowered but ready. One knelt beside him. The other kept her eyes on every alien in the room. Darius looked past them to the window. Above the broken capital, the first pale line of morning moved over the horizon. Human ships hung in that light without banners. Varath watched their silhouettes and understood something his language had no clean word for. Humanity did not send its strongest people where victory was certain. It sent them where defeat needed someone to wait inside it. The medic touched Darius's shoulder. This time the hand did not shake. Outside, over the hidden world, the rain began to fall upward in the heat of descending engines.
One man became the root home to an empire's hidden world. Hope you enjoyed the story. For more stories where humanity refuses to break, subscribe to our channel.